Right then, let us begin this collecting journey with the Doctor Who target novelisation hardback books. Pretty much the most rarest and sought after range there is by collectors, and I am very, very happy with what I have from this range, and it would be great to get more, but I just don't really have the space for them at the moment. So starting off here, we actually have where everything began with Doctor Who books, with the Frederick Muller original of Doctor Who in an Exciting Adventure with the Daleks. This is the very first Doctor Who book ever published, and this is the first edition of that book. Not only that, it is a non-ex library book, and just to top everything off, I got this for £30. And then here we have the BBC reprint of the Frederick Muller original of Doctor Who: An Exciting Adventure with the Daleks, which was published a few years back. The Edge of Destruction, which is a fantastic target novelisation. Same here with Marco Polo. Non-ex library of the Aztecs. Muller replica reprint of the Zabi. 1985 reprint of the Crusaders. Muller reprint replica of the Crusaders here, which was at the time one of my favourite Doctor Who stories of all time, but when I read the novelisation courtesy of this, I wasn't too much a fan of the novelisation personally. I'm not a massive fan of the TV story anymore, but this was sort of back when the Crusade was literally one of my favourite stories, so a bit underwhelmed by that novelisation I was. The Space Museum, Galaxy 4, which is probably my favourite target novelisation. Absolutely love that book. The Massacre, which is a weaker novelisation in my opinion on a weaker story. The Ark, which was actually my first book that I read in 2019. I have no idea why I picked the Ark target novelisation for that, but there we go, it was my first read of 2019, and it was a pretty good novelisation of a so-so story. Then here we have The Celestial Toymaker, which is an incredible novelisation of a pretty great story, and this is a non-ex library hardback, and I got it signed by Peter Purvis at Dimensions 2016. So there we go, pretty cool stuff. Then here we have Stephen's Departure Story via the Savages, which is a non-ex library hardback once again. Then we have Doctor Who and the 10th Planet, Alan Wingate hardback. Quite wanted this book actually, I would have said, because it's quite a significant story in many ways. The 10th Planet, final William Hartnell story, first story to feature the Cybermen, and it's just a fantastic story in general. So this was one of my most wanted target hardbacks to obtain in the collection. And then here we have what I would say is quite possible, which I would say is actually the biggest find in my entire collecting career, I would have said. This next item here is a non-ex library, W.H. Allen hardback of the Highlanders that is actually hand-signed, if we were to open it up, by all three of the companion actors that appeared in the original televised story. Fraser Hines, Michael Craze and Anarchy Wells. I was just randomly browsing Fury from the Deep stuff on eBay. I saw that the same seller had a non-ex library W.H. Allen hardback of Fury from the Deep, hand-signed by Deborah Watling for £70. Checked the description and he said he might have other Doctor Who books hand-signed by various actors, and that's how I found this. He had it on bid and make an offer with the bid of £150, and I offered him £130, and he accepted. And I know that's a lot, but for something like this, which I couldn't even imagine existing for 1960s era, it was just such an amazing item and purchase to make, as 1960s era is my favourite era of Doctor Who, which is explained why I have so many more hardbacks of it than other eras. But yeah, this is one of the biggest crown jewels in my collection for obvious reasons, and I will cherish that book. And it's a pretty great novelisation as well. I've read it via the paperback. The Underwater Menace. This is a fantastic novelisation on a fantastic story. Yes, I called The Underwater Menace a fantastic TV story. I know, weird, but I personally just adore the Underwater Menace. I think it is so underrated, and well, not solely underrated. I can see why people would hate the story, but in my opinion, it's one that's so bad it's good. I just have a weird fascination and love for the Underwater Menace. Massive guilty pleasure. Non-X Library W.H. Allen hardback of the Faceless Ones that I unbelievably managed to get for a tenner, and it is in mint condition apart from that one chip on the spine. So the fact that I got this pretty rare hardback for only a tenner is incredible, and it's non-X Library as well. Another one of the biggest items in the collection here, Tomb of the Cybermen W.H. Allen hardback signed by Gary Davis. And as you can see, yes, this is a non-X Library, but it's hand signed by Deborah Watling, Victoria, Fraser Hines, Jamie and Jeff Cummins, who did the cover illustration. I bought this hardback off of eBay for £20 when it was just signed by Deborah, and then I got it signed by Fraser and Jeff at Dimensions 2016. Absolutely incredible item to have. Non-X Library W.H. Allen hardback of The Ice Warriors, which was one of my most wanted Doctor Who books. Same with this, Fury from the Deep, Non-X Library, once again. The Dominators, another one of my most wanted Doctor Who books, The Mind Robber, Non-X Library, W.H. Allen hardback. The Ultron Invasion, Alan Wingate, one of the rarest Target hardbacks there is. Inferno, The Mind of Evil, The Robots of Death, Horror of Fang Rock, Underworld, which is a great novelisation, Invasion of Time, not so much, but then again the TV story isn't that good either. Exact same opinion pretty much with the Stones of Blood here. Creature from the Pit, Nightmare of Eden, Meglos, Kinder, Snake Dance, Enlightenment, Non-X Library W.H. Allen hardback of The King's Demons, and then we have this oddity on the end here, which is I believe it's an X Library of The Awakening here, and what makes this one so special in particular is that it's actually hand signed by 11 different people that have played various people throughout Doctor Who. I don't think it's all connected to The Awakening, but it's still a pretty interesting and cool item to have, and it was going for really cheap on eBay, and I just decided, do you know what, I'm going to get it. It's got some cool autographs in there, I'm just going to get it, and I ended up getting this for £16, believe it or not. It has some pretty interesting stuff in here, such as John Nathan Turner, Peter Halliday, who played Packer and the priest in Remembrance of the Daleks, Packer and the Invasion, and the late great Peter Miles there. So yeah, quite an odd item, but one that I got for an absolute bargain, and one that I am pretty happy to have in the collection. And there we go, there was my Target hardback collection. Moving on to the Target paperbacks. Alright, then we are now moving on to the Target paperback section of my collection. And as you can see, I have so many Target paperbacks to the point where I've just kind of had to divide it like this, and this is kind of a trendsetter for the video. Anyways, let's start off my Target paperback section with the BBC reprint of Doctor Who and the Daleks there, and then an old 1970s edition of the Daleks there. Marco Polo, which is a fantastic Target novelisation. 2 copies of the Keys of Marinus, one of which is a first edition, I think, and I believe that is the Faded Spine one. Then we have the Aztecs here. Sensorites by Nigel Robinson, who's a very good author for the Target novelisations, based off of Edge of Destruction. Planets of Giants by Terence Dicks, a great novelisation of one of my favourite William Hartnell stories. The Dalek Invasion of Earth there. Would love to have the Alan Wingate of that. The Romans there. BBC reprint of The Zarbi, which is a great novelisation. Then we have the Crusaders paperback reprint. Space Museum there. The Time Meddler. Galaxy 4. Star Classics 2-in-1 re-release of The Mythmakers and the Gunfighters. The Daleks Master Plan Part 1, Mission to the Unknown, and The Daleks Master Plan Part 2, The Mutation of Time, which is a fantastic Target novelisation duet. The Ark, Savages, 10th Planet here, which is signed by Anarchy Wills, this old 70s paperback. I somehow managed to get this for £4 off of eBay, I think. Then we have the 10th Planet BBC reprint there. Power of the Daleks there, which is a great novelisation. Covered it in my Power of the Daleks multimedia review from a couple years ago. Highlanders there. 70s edition of the Cybermen, 80s edition of the Cybermen, or a later 70s edition of it, and the BBC reprint edition of the Cybermen there. I have so many copies of this because I've been able to find them for really cheap, and it is one of my favourite Target novelisations of all time, so that's kind of why I have a couple copies of it there. Then we have the Macra Terror there, which was a part of one of the biggest finds in my entire collection. I managed to get this paperback as well as 13 other Target novelisation paperbacks all together at once for only 50p each, or £7 in total. And I did cover this find in a Underworld Updates instalment, or I think it might have actually been before Underworld Updates, I'm not too sure, but I definitely covered this 14 book bundle deal from a secondhand bookshop in some collection video in the past. Then we have the Faceless ones there, and then a big rare one at the end here, The Evil of the Daleks. Then we have Tomb of the Cybermen by Jerry Davis, which I found in a charity shop recently. Then we have one of my favourite Target novelisations, The Abominable Snowmen there. The Ice Warriors, this particular edition I bought at the same time as I bought this novelisation edition of The Ark in Space, all the way back from the Works shop back in Easter 2014. I bought both of these at the same time, and this in turn ended up becoming the very first Doctor Who book I ever read, which is what started my entire love for the Doctor Who range, and it's kind of why I wanted the hardback edition so much. Then we have a very special one here, and one that I'm very happy to have in the collection. This is a 2016 reprint of The Web of Fear, signed by Chris Arkelios and the legend Terrance Dicks there. I've read this Target novelisation, and it was pretty good. I felt it was a little standard and maybe a bit overhyped for a Target novelisation, but it was still really good, and I'm really happy to have that signed copy in my collection. One of the best Target novelisations in my opinion, Fury from the Deep, which is absolutely fantastic. Have I reviewed this one? I think I might have done. But yeah, I'd highly recommend this novelisation. It's incredible, as is the television story. The Wheel in Space by Terrance Dicks, another big rare one there. My 2 copies of The Invasion here, which is an alright novelisation. It gets very violent and mature in some areas. Then we have The War Games, another one that I recently obtained. Then we have The Auton Invasion, one I'm very interested in reading. The Cave Monsters, ditto, and a 70s edition of The Cave Monsters there. The Ambassadors of Death paperback, signed by Derek Martin there, who played a policeman in this original story. Then we have The Daemons, Day of the Daleks, The Curse of Peladon, The Sea Devils, The Mutants, and then we have which is getting caught on a copy of the Time Monster there, which I found in I believe a vintage shop that came in like this little plastic thing, so I just haven't really taken it out of that yet. It's just kind of cool to have it in. Then we have the Three Doctors 70s edition, I think. Then the much nicer looking reprint in my opinion. But yeah, I really like this one, much prefer the cover to it, and it's a fantastic novelisation. Carnival of Monsters, The Green Death, Death to the Daleks, Monster of Peladon, Planet of Spiders, Giant Robots, the aforementioned reprint of The Ark in Space, Revenge of the Cybermen there, another sort of treasured one in my collection, Doctor and the Loch Ness Monster, which once again is signed by Terrance Dicks and Archelios. Fantastic to have. Still haven't watched the original television story somehow, I know, shoot me. Pyramids of Mars there, which I found in a charity shop ages ago. Very battered copy of The Mask of Mandragora, and then a version reprint of it there. Then we have The Deadly Assassin, Face of Evil, which I have read and pages literally started falling out of it. Then we have The Robots of Death, which is fantastic. Talons of Weng Chiang, original print from the 70s and version reprint there. Then we have The Invisible Enemy, which is a great novelisation. Image of the Fendal, which is good. Sunmakers, which is good as well. Underworld, which is great. Novelisation. Ribos Operation. Armageddon Factor, quite interested in reading that one as I have a big soft spot for the TV story. Destiny of the Daleks. Creature from the Pit. Horns of Naimon there as well. Then we have The Leisure Hive. Meglos, Warrior's Gate, one I'm quite interested in reading. Same for the next two, Keeper of Traken and Logopolis. Both of these are reviews coming up on my channel, the TV stories that is. Castrovalva, 2 copies of Kinder for some reason, version reprints of The Visitation, Black Orchid, Time Flight, Mordrin Undead, Terminus, The 5 Doctors, Frontios, BBC reprint of Vengeance on Varos, The 2 Doctors, Delta and the Bannerman, Silver Nemesis, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, Battlefield and Survival, Mission to Magnus, Slipback, and then Paradise of Death on the end there. Alright then, so next up we have the mainline Virgin New Adventure books, all of the ones featuring the 7th Doctor and even the 8th Doctor, and I will be showcasing the Bernice Summerfield ones later on. And because of space and the way I've sort of organised it for this video and everything, I have the Time Worm and Cat's Cradle books here, and then everything else I have of the range sort of at the back here in order. So without further ado, let us begin this sort of showcasing of this section with Time Worm Genesis, the very first Virgin New Adventures book published. Then we have Time Worm Exodus, Apocalypse, Revelation, Time's Crucible there, Warhead, and which has some nice sort of Blade Runner vibes to the cover, I would have said, which is my favourite movie franchise of all time, so that's quite nice on my part. And then we have Witchmark here, of which I have 2 copies for some reason. The other copy is elsewhere. And now we're moving on to all of the other Virgin New Adventure books. We have Love and War, which is a fan favourite. Transit, well, no, I'm quite curious in reading, but I have heard mixed things about it. Just the premise sounds pretty interesting to me. Highest Science there, another fan favourite one, would like to read that as Gareth Roberts is an amazing author. The Pit, quite a maligned one. Deceit, another fan favourite, Lucifer Rising. White Darkness. Birthright, one I have read and one I've also reviewed on the channel. Quite an interesting short little book. Blood Heat, another fan favourite. Conundrum, one of many, one of quite a few books that Steve Lyons did in the Virgin New Adventures book range. That is actually a sequel to The Mind Robber. Tragedy Day, I read this one earlier this year, another great book by Gareth Roberts. Legacy, one that I'm quite interested in. Bernice has Sex of an Ice Warrior in that, so that's pretty unique. Blood Harvest by the late great Terrance Dicks, one I'd like to read. First Frontier by David A. McKinty. One of my favourite Doctor Who books of all time, and one of my favourite books of all time, Falls to Shadow by Daniel O'Mahony. It's an absolute brick of a book, but it's so fantastic, just very mad and psychedelic. Parasite by Jim Mortimore. Warlock, which continues the War trilogy, which started off in the Cat's Cradle book Warhead. And we have Set Piece, another one I've read earlier this year. Absolutely god-awful book in my opinion. Hated it. 2 copies of Infinite Requiem for some reason. And then we have Sanctuary. Original Sin, which is absolutely fantastic. Sky Pirates, one I'm curious in reading. Toy Soldiers, another one that I have read, which was also great. Head Games, another one of Lyons' sequels to The Mind Robber. Now and then we have The Also People. This is interesting. I don't think a lot of people would know this, but this is actually one of the rarest Virgin New Adventure books you can actually get from the whole range. Most people would think of the likes of Lungbarrow, The Dying Days of Savannah Sin, but no, this isn't as rare as those, but it is also up there with the rarest Virgin New Adventure books you can actually buy. And I don't know the exact stories to this, but from what I've heard, this got a limited print run due to issues with the cover and the printing of the cover, and as such the print run was limited, and as such it's a rare book because of that, and it's like £30 on Amazon. And I believe I got this as a part of a big book bundle, and the price of that bundle was £30 to £40, so that secured me a copy of The Also People. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. The climax to the War trilogy with War Child. Christmas on a Rational Planet by Lawrence Miles, the beginning of the faction paradox nonsense and arc and craziness that just sort of happened over the years. Return of the Living Dad by Kate Orman, which is a great book, quite a fun little run-around book. Great character piece for Bernice Summerfield. The Death of Art by Simon Butcher Jones, one book that I'm interested in reading. Damaged Goods, basically Doctor Who meets the Saw franchise. This book, I can't even begin to describe how fucked up it is. It is unbelievable, that book. Bad Therapy, I think the only Virgin New Adventure that I've actually read twice. Absolutely fantastic book. I know this is one of Harry Williams Productions' favourite Doctor Who books, and I don't blame him, because that is an absolutely fantastic book. Then we have The Room with No Doors by Kate Orman. Then we have The Legendary Lungbarrow by Mark Platt. This is an original print, not one of the new fanzine reprints that were recently done. Yeah, I liked it, but it was a bit underwhelming. I only give that book a 6 out of 10. Again, I've reviewed that book. And another one I've reviewed, The Dying Days, which closes off the end to the Virgin New Adventures line, and the only one featuring the 8th Doctor, and as you probably know, is a very rare Doctor Who book for collectors to try and obtain. But yeah, whereas it's nice to have in the collection, it is not nice to read. I think this book is a big piece of shit in my opinion. I know that's surprising to some people, but I really don't like The Dying Days much at all. And here is what I have of these sort of original black covered Virgin Missing Adventure books. I have approximately 2/3 of this range overall, both in these sort of original editions and the reprints, which I'll show later on. But either way, let's get on with the Virgin Missing Adventures with the first one from the range, Goth Opera. This is a tie-in to the Virgin New Adventure Blood Harvest, as I don't know which order it is, but Goth Opera is either a sequel or a prequel to Blood Harvest, and Blood Harvest is either a sequel or a prequel to Goth Opera. It's something along the lines of that, but I don't exactly know which order. Then we have Evolution here by John Peel. Venusian Lullaby. The Romance of Crime, one of my favourite books of all time, absolutely love that thing. Time of Your Life by Steve Lyons, which has very sort of Vengeance on Valos vibes. Dancing the Code. Then we have The Menagerie, one that I'm quite interested in reading. System Shock, which is meant to be a really, really good one from what I've heard. Sorcerer's Apprentice, sort of first Doctor going sort of a fantasy direction, should be an interesting read. Invasion of the Cat People, one I've heard absolutely horrible things about, but my furry side may get the better of me there. Millennial Rights, one that I have read, and first half was pretty amazing, but the second wasn't so. Yeah, not that good of a book in my opinion, it's alright. The Empire of Glass by Andy Lane, one I'm again quite interested in reading. Downtime, which is the Virgin New Adventures adaptation of the fan film video, direct-to-video thing, and this book actually has photos from the production and the actual fan film from it printed within the book, which is pretty cool, and I would like to check out the fan film someday, but I have heard it isn't that good, but it is something I would like to check out anyways, as the Great Intelligence is my favourite Doctor Who villain. Then we have The Man in the Velvet Mask, Twilight of the Gods, and then The Plotters at the end here, which is a great little First Doctor historical story. Fantastic little read that is, in my opinion. Maybe a bit overrated, as I've heard some people say that this is one of the, if not the best, Virgin Missing Adventures book. Personally, I would disagree to that, but it is still great. And then we have the big boys on the end here, Cold Fusion by Lance Parkin, which I am very interested in reading, but again, the author's name sort of puts me off of it because of The Dying Days, as that's the only book I've read by Lance Parkin, but yeah, I'm definitely interested in reading this. Then we have The Dark Path, which was an absolute pain in the ass to get. It took me about 2 years to try and get this book because of how much bad luck I was having with it. But yeah, I'm still very interested in reading The Dark Path. I have heard it is a sequel to Twilight of the Gods, so I think I need to read this before reading The Dark Path. I think its sequelness is a bit loose, but I still think I need to read this before I read The Dark Path. So yeah, still interested in reading The Dark Path, as I have heard amazing things about it. I just haven't heard too many good things about Twilight of the Gods, which is the thing. But either ways, then we have The Well-Mannered Ward, the last book from the Virgin Missing Adventures range of books. One I recently obtained in my collection. I recently uploaded an unboxing video of it on the 22nd of October, and I managed to track it down for about £30, which is a fantastic price for the book, in my opinion. And I am most definitely interested in reading it, as I have heard amazing things about it, and it is written by one of the absolute titans of the Doctor Who books, in my opinion, Gareth Roberts. So there we go, there was my Virgin Missing Adventures group of books. Alright then, let us move on to the 8th Doctor adventure books published by the BBC. And as you can see, like with my Virgin New Adventures, I have so many to the point of the original prints, 48 exactly, weirdly enough, that I have to sort of show them like this. So let's start off with my first 10 with the 8 Doctors, which I found in a charity shop for £20 in their collectors section, which was a good price for the book at the time. And I kind of wanted it, so I just decided to get it. And yeah, probably a bit rarer now since the late great Terrance Dicks has passed. Yeah, I'm interested in reading that one. Body Snatchers, I've heard this one's a bit mixed. Genocide, I've heard this one's really convoluted. War of the Daleks, another quite polarising one, as is the other one, Legacy of the Daleks, I believe it's called. Alien Bodies by Lawrence Miles, one I am very interested in reading. Curacao, Dreamstone Moon, which was pretty good. And then we have the absolutely spectacular Seeing Eye, one of my favourite books of all time. Absolutely incredible technological horror type of book, I just obliterated that thing in 3 days. It was fantastic. We have Placebo Effect, which is a fan favourite by many, but I personally found there to be quite a few problems with it. I can't remember all of them, but I had like 7 big problems with the book, if I remember. It was an alright read overall, but still. And then we have Vanda Decken's Children on the end there. The Scarlet Empress there. The Face Eater by Simon Messingham, one I have read, wasn't too impressed by it here. One that does interest me quite a bit, but unfortunately with a lot of the 8th Doctor adventure books, there was so many arcs flying through the entire range, it kind of makes me scared to read any of them because there is so much to the 8th Doctor adventure books, and yeah, kind of almost a curse with having so many that interests me. Unnatural History there, which I've heard is quite arc heavy. Then we have Autumn Mist here, which I've heard is a pretty nice standalone one. Then we have Interference Book 1, Shock Tactic, and then Interference Book 2, The Hour of the Geek here, which is one big sort of multi-part Doctor Who novel that Lawrence Miles tried to do in order to fix the faction paradox arc, but it didn't really work from what I've heard. I think I've kind of heard mixed things about these books and the kind of faction paradox arc in general, but it's still nice to have those. Then we have The Taking of Planet 5 by Simon Butcher-Jones and Mark Clapham. Frontier Worlds by Peter Angel-Edes. Parallel 59 by Natalie Declare and Stephen Cole, the first 8th Doctor adventure I ever bought, along with The Algebra of Ice and Science Fiction at the same time in a second-hand bookshop for £4 each back in 2014. The Fall of Y Quantine. The Banquo Legacy, which I've heard is meant to be a really good, albeit dark one. The Ancestor Cell, which is meant to be like the ultimate end to the Faction Paradox arc for the 8th Doctor adventures. Start of the Earth arc now with The Burning, which continues into Casualties of War, and it goes into these next books. The Turing Test, which has quite a nice Easter egg to the cover, as all of the highlighted keys on the typewriter spell out Doctor Who, so yeah, pretty cool little Easter egg there. Endgame, Father Time, and then the End to the Earth arc with Escape Velocity there. And yes, I have all 6 books from this arc, quite a small little arc, which I may get around to reading someday. Then we have Vanishing Point there. Eater of Wasps, which I've heard is meant to be really good, but as a person that's a phobic of wasps, I'm quite unsettled by the thought of reading this book alone. I think that one can be quite disturbing for myself. The Year of the Intelligent Tigers, which I've heard is meant to be absolutely amazing, and I'm very interested in reading it because maybe it's another Doctor Who book with furries in it, and hopefully that is the case, because can't have enough of that. Then we have The Slow Empire there. Dark Progeny. The City of Death by Lloyd Rose. Grim Reality there, which has a very interesting misprint on the spine there, where the little shrunken framed picture of the cover there isn't on the spine, which is quite interesting. Then we have The Adventuress of Henrietta Street by Lawrence Miles. The 100th Doctor Who novel published by the BBC, Mad Dogs and an Englishman, which is a fantastic read in my opinion. Would recommend that one, it's really good, but can be very mad, weird and psychedelic in some areas, so be warned of that, but still give it a chance. It's one hell of an experience and it is a great read in my opinion. Hope by Mark Clapham. Doctor Who does James Bond by the looks of it with Trading Futures. The Book of the Still. The Crooked World. History 101 by Mags L. Halliday. Camera Obscura. Time Zero. The Infinity Race. The Domino Effect. and then the end of my original prints with The Last Resort by Paul Leonard. And next up we have this beautiful range right here, the Past Doctor Adventures. Now, if you are exploring Doctor Who books and are looking for some good ones to read, this is the range I would go for. This is my all-time favourite range of Doctor Who books. Across the reprints and these original prints that I have read, it has been the most consistent range there has been. I have read about 18 instalments over the years since 2014, and not a single one has gone below a 5 out of 10. There's only been a couple 5s or 6s, but the other 15, maybe 14 that I have read have all been 7 out of 10s or above, with some of my all-time favourite books being contained within this range. So starting off, we have The Devil Goblins from Neptune, which I have 2 copies of because I bought one of these from a second-hand bookshop a while ago and got another one as part of a bundle. Great opener for the Past Doctor Adventures range of books. It is a great third Doctor adventure, very season 7-esque. It has a lot of grit and nasty stuff to it, kind of reminiscent of Inferno to an extent, but a little more amplified. Then we have The Murder Game. This not only is one of the best Doctor Who books I've ever read, it is quite possibly the greatest book I have ever read on the whole. This is simply an absolute masterpiece in my opinion, The Murder Game, and it is such a love letter to Second Doctor, Doctor Who, and the Second Doctor in general. It is simply incredible, and if you're a fan of the Second Doctor, 1960s Doctor, and if you've not read that yet, you are doing yourself a great disservice. It is a masterpiece. Business Unusual by Gary Russell, and also signed by Gary Russell. Fantastic book, absolutely incredible. Sixth Doctor adventure, I would have said personally. This was one of the last instalments to the Scourge General Reviews. The Witch Hunters, again by Steve Lyons, another masterpiece, fantastic, pure historical, another one of the best books I've read. The Hollow Men by Keith Topping and Martin Day. Last Man Running by Chris Boucher. Salvation by Steve Lyons once again. This was a lesser one in my opinion, about a 5 or a 6 out of 10. Had some good moments to it, especially the Dodo stuff at the beginning, but it kind of went a bit cartoony. Deep Blue, one I'm very interested in reading. Storm Harvest. The Final Sanction by Steve Lyons again, sequel to The Murder Game, cannot wait to read that one. City at World's End, The Inferno of the First Doctor era, great read. Last of the Gadarene, which I've read via the 50th anniversary reprint, and it was fantastic, magnificent third Doctor story. Another one I'm very interested in reading, Grave Matter, recent addition to the collection, found it in a charity shop. Heart of TARDIS, a second Doctor, fourth Doctor, multi-Doctor novel, one that I'm quite interested in reading. Same with this, Prime Time, a seventh Doctor adventure. Then we have Bunker Soldiers by Martin Day. Asylum, Byzantium. Science Fiction, the very first Doctor Who novel I read, full-length Doctor Who novel I read from cover to cover. It was okay. Dying in the Sun, second Doctor adventure, one I'm quite interested in. Instruments of Darkness. Then we have Drift, which is one I'm very interested in reading. Combat Rock, one I kind of want to read but don't want to read at the same time because Mick Lewis, he wrote Rags. If you've been in the Doctor Who book community for a while, you'll know who Mick Lewis is. Colony of Lies, which is very apt because this is supposedly a 7th Doctor and 2nd Doctor book, but the 7th Doctor only appears in the prologue and epilogue, which is really silly. Then we have The 11th Tiger, which is a book that tried to be sort of a tribute to First Doctor historicals, succeeded in that, but kind of failed to succeed in an overall story, I think, if I remember this one right. It was okay. I got it for a couple quid off of eBay once, and it was a decent read. Not that good, it was alright. Then we have The Algebra of Ice by Lloyd Rose. This was a fantastic 7th Doctor book. The rarest past Doctor adventure of them all, The Indestructible Man, one that I'm interested in reading. The Island of Death by Barry Letts. Then we have Spiral Scratch here, which is another one signed by Gary Russell. This is a fantastic 6th Doctor finale, pretty mind-boggling. Do stick with it, but in my opinion this would be the definitive 6th Doctor regeneration story. Then we have Fear Itself, which features the 8th Doctor, but at the time this book was published, the 9th Doctor was already on TV, so it's considered a past Doctor adventure. Then we have World Game, which is this part of this really sort of complicated and all over the place the War Games sequel book series Terrance Dicks tried to do across multiple ranges, and this is the sort of culmination and finale of that. I've read and reviewed both the opener and the closer to this sort of mini series, that being Players and the closer World Game. I've read and reviewed both of these, so if you want to know a bit more about that sort of series and my thoughts on those two books, check them out. But again, this was sort of a lesser one in my opinion. On the end here we have The Time Travellers by Simon Guerrier, which is the penultimate past Doctor Adventures book. Bit an average one in my opinion. So there was my main line of the past Doctor Adventures books. And here we go, we are now moving on to the new series Doctor Who books, of which I have about, I would say over 90% of everything that was released with regards to new series Doctor Who books, and there are 4 rows like this in total to showcase, so there's quite a bit to get through of the new series. So let's get started with the 9th Doctor books here. The Clockwise Man, the first new series book published, and probably the first Doctor Who novel I ever bought. Haven't read it. The Monsters Inside Rare, which is meant to be a really good one. Winner Takes All, which I actually got as a prize in a competition years and years ago now. The Deviant Strain there. Only Human there, one I'm very interested in reading. The Stealers of Dreams in paperback and hardback there, one I'm also pretty interested in reading. I've heard good things about that. And this here is a complete set of the 9th Doctor books. There was meant to be a another 9th Doctor book called Reign of Terror, written by Mike Tucker, but due to work commitments he couldn't finish that book, and it got replaced with Stealers of Dreams. I believe from what I've read, Reign of Terror was eventually worked into an 11th Doctor read, published later on. The Epstone Rose, Feasted of the Drowned, the Resurrection Casket there. These are 2 that I had as audiobooks when I was a kid, as well as the Stone Rose actually, and I remember listening to these 3 and like the 2 CD abridged audiobooks they did, read by David Tennant, just countlessly. I just loved them, and I'd probably like to read those books out of nostalgia someday. Resurrection Casket in paperback, The Nightmare of Black Island there. The Art of Destruction, one I have read and it was okay from what I remember. The Price of Paradise, Sting of the Zygons, another one I had as a one of the 2 CD audiobooks. Absolutely loved that one. The Last Dodo there. Wooden Heart over Autumn, which is meant to be awful, as is this one here, Sick Building. Wet World, Wishing Well, hardback and paperback. The Pirate Loop, hardback and paperback. Peacemaker, hardback and paperback. And then we have 2 copies of Martha in the Mirror at the end here in hardback for some reason. And now we have the remainder of the 10th Doctor books and then the start of the 11th Doctor books. I believe I have all of the mainline new series books with regards to the 9th and 10th Doctors, and I also have all of the quick reads as well, so I think I've got a full set of the New Who books with regards to 10th and 9th. So we have Snow Globe 7 there, The Many Hands, Ghosts of India, The Doctor Trap, Shining Darkness, The Story of Martha, which I believe I have a paperback of somewhere, Beautiful Chaos in hardback and paperback, very beautiful cover as it were, and quite interested in reading that one actually. Same with this one here, The Eyeless by Lance Parkin in hardback and paperback. Then we have Judgment of the Jadoon, The Slovene Excursion, Prison of the Daleks, which I have read twice and I have also reviewed. First time I absolutely loved it, second time I found it to be a bit overrated, but still a great book. This is meant to be like a kingpin of the new series books, one of the most popular ones. I do find it to be a bit overrated, but still a very good read, great nonetheless. The Taking of Chelsea 426, hardback and paperback, Autonomy, that which is a great read. The Crillatane Storm, which I think I remember reading this one, and I think it was pretty good. Apollo 23 there, into the 11th Doctor books now. Night of the Humans, I believe I do have a paperback of Apollo 23 somewhere. The Forgotten Army, Nuclear Time, The King's Dragon, The Glamour Chase, The Coming of the Terror Files by Michael Moorcock, Dead of Winter there, The Way Through the Woods there, Hunter's Moon, Touched by an Angel, one I'm quite interested in reading, and then Paradox Lost at the end, a recent addition to my collection. And then here's what I have of the remainder of 11, 12, War and 13. So here we go. The Silent Stars Go By, Dark Horizons, The Dalek Generation, which is one I've read and reviewed. Same with this, Engines of War. Same with Prison of the Daleks, I've read this twice. This is fantastic, highly recommend that one. The Blood Cell there, Silhouette, and The Crawling Terror there. This is the first trio batch of the 12th Doctor, and all of these books get an 8 out of 10 in my opinion. I think the most well liked one is the Blood Cell, but my personal favourite would be Silhouette, but they're all fantastic books in my opinion, all get 8 out of 10s. And then here we have Royal Blood, which was absolutely awful, pretty bad. The Big Bang Generation, which is a pretty good book in my opinion. I quite liked the sort of dynamic between the 12th Doctor and Bernice Summerfield. I quite liked that a lot, as Bernice Summerfield is the companion in this book, not the 12th, not like the 12th Doctor or Clara or anything like that. It's just the 12th Doctor and Bernice Summerfield, which is pretty interesting, and I did enjoy reading this book. It's nothing amazing, but I would give it a 7 out of 10. And then here we have Deep Time, the conclusion to the Glamour Chronicles. It started absolutely awfully and it ends absolutely awfully. This is the worst out of the entire Glamour Chronicles trilogy in my opinion. Royal Blood's awful, I think that's the most hated, but I hated Deep Time even more. It's horrendous, that book, I just hate it so much. Clever what they did with the cover though, but that's the only real merit I can give it, I think, if I remember right. I just really didn't like this book at all, about a 3 out of 10. Then here we have In the Blood, which is absolutely fantastic in my opinion. I got this on the day of release, read it in 4 days flat, and released a video review less than a week after its release, which I was pretty happy with. But yeah, absolutely fantastic book that is, in my opinion. I love it. And then here we have The Shining Man, which is a signed copy by Cavan Scott. This was awful in my opinion. Kind of does a similar thing to In the Blood, but kind of blends it with the Slender Man myth, and just kind of, it's just awful in my opinion. I really didn't like that one. A lot of people do, but I hate this book. I think it's awful. I think that's a 2 out of 10 or something. I really don't like that. Diamond Dogs, which is also a signed copy by Mike Tucker. Haven't read this one yet. Haven't heard it's pretty good though. Then we have Molten Hearts by Una McCormick. Another one that is signed. Quite interested in reading that one. Combat Magics by Steve Carl, which is again a signed copy. And then The Good Doctor at the end here, which is also a signed copy, as you can see there. Then here we just have some little miscellaneous new series books on the end here. We have Death Riders here, 2 paperback copies of it there. Then here we have System Wipe. Then we have the complete set of the quick reads with I Am a Dalek there. Then Made of Steel, Revenge of the Jadoon, large print, and a smaller print there. Same with the Sontaran games here. Then here we have Code of the Krillitanes, which is one I have again read twice and reviewed. Magic of the Angels there, which wasn't that good. Silurian Gift. Then here we have Decide Your Destiny books, the Spaceship Graveyard, Alien Arena, the Time Crocodile, the Corinthian Projects, the Crystal Snare, and the Dark Planet there. Then here we have the Darksmith Legacy books here. There was actually, with regards to when I released all of my book reviews and did them, there was quite a big gap in between my 26th episode of the Skulls General Reviews, The Tomb of the Cybermen, and the 27th Lung Barrow. And originally in that gap, I was originally going to revive book reviews on my channel with a review on this 10 book series here. And that never happened because I only ended up reading 6 of these books. Took a break from them and just never came back. So the first one, The Dust of Ages, which was really good. The Graves of Mordain, which was also really good. The Colour of Darkness, which was also really good. The Depths of Despair, which I think might have been bad, or was it really good? I can't quite remember. Vampire of Paris, I remember this one being absolutely awful. The Game of Death, which I remember was absolutely fantastic. Then here we have The Planet of Oblivion, The Pictures of Emptiness, The Art of War, and The End of Time there. And this was before the TV one. Then here we have a couple of the Sarah Jane Adventures novelizations: Revenge of the Slitheen, Eye of the Gorgon, Warriors of Kulak, The Lost Boy there. And then here we have the new series quiz books with the first one, second one, third one. Now we're moving on to all of my BBC reprints, as well as a couple charity novels and sort of big hardback books. So starting off at the end here, we have 2 ultra rare charity novels. First one of which is Campaign by Jim Mortimore in this lovely paperback edition, which is hand signed by the man himself. Very interested in reading this one, and I will give it a go at some point. It's just one that does scare me a lot, as I've heard it does some really risque things, and even switches media. It goes from traditional book to like physical board game at one point, and even goes to a comic book towards the end, and it's all a really mad looking book, but I quite like my mad books, so maybe this will be one I'll enjoy. Probably will, not too sure. Definitely interested in reading it though. And then we have this big rare titan here, Times Champion by Craig Hinton and Chris McKayon, signed by Colin Baker and John Levine. Yeah, I've read this one, and boy oh boy was it a crazy one. I do find this to be a bit of an overrated one. I don't think it's as good as everybody says it is, but it's a nice and interesting sort of end for the Sixth Doctor in book form, and I have reviewed this one in the past. I would give this about a 6 out of 10. It's a very, very mad book and a bit of an overrated one in my opinion, but still a pretty good read in my opinion. Can be very mad and heavy with continuity at some points in it though, so be wary of that. And then here we have some of the big hardback books of novels of the classic series done by the BBC. We have City of Death by James Goss, which is an adaptation of the Douglas Adams TV story. One I have not read yet, but one I would love to because I love the City of Death. I think that's amazing. Then we have Sharda here, one I've actually read twice. Both times I read it in 9 days, and I was going to be reviewing this sort of to build up towards the release of the animation that they did a couple years ago, but I never finished that project. It never happened. I think I may have started a review script or something, but project has never finished, sadly, for whatever reason. Not too sure why, but it's a really, really good book. Right? I would highly recommend it. Then we have The Cricket Men here, which is another one by James Goss. This is an adaptation of a Douglas Adams story that never happened, that never got brought to TV. It wasn't made, and yeah, quite interested in reading that one. Heard it's really good. And then we have this massive event in Doctor Who fandom for 2019, Scratchman, which is one I have read and reviewed. And excluding the outro I did in the video, this comes to my longest book review to date at about 32 minutes, and my longest review on a singular story, technically. But yeah, it's a very interesting book in my opinion. I don't think it's as good as everybody says it is. I do think it is quite an overrated book, as there is some pretty big problems with it. It's a very interesting read. I can see why some people would love it, but for me it has a lot of problems, and I think it kind of destroys its own structure in some ways in the second half. If you want a bit more of depth and detail as to that, check out my review, which I did a little while ago. Then we have the Drostan's Curse here, which is just a mess of a book in my opinion. I find this one very overrated. I honestly couldn't finish reading this one. It was just a massive mess in my opinion. There were so many scenes that I felt were unnecessary. I had no idea what the hell was going on in this book. It was a mess in my opinion. And then here we have The Wheel of Ice by Stephen Baxter, second Doctor story. Really interested in reading that one. When digging my new series books out of storage for the video, I uncovered this paperback edition of Harvest of Time by Alistair Reynolds, which is a third Doctor novel. One that, despite the very phallic cover, is a book that interests me greatly, and it does sound like a really good sort of your typical traditional third Doctor adventure. Then we have 50th anniversary reprints with 10 Little Aliens There, which is a fantastic first Doctor novel. Very gritty and graphic though. It's more akin to being a Sixth Doctor type of book, but or Sixth Doctor type of story, but still a really, really good one this, and is one of my favourite 1960s Doctor Who stories at a 9 out of 10. Not one of my all-time favourites, probably close to the 15th position. Dreams of Empire by Justin Richards, which is a pretty nice, fun little read. Nothing too groundbreaking, nothing too out there. It's a very nice, easy to read book at a 7 out of 10 in my opinion. Then we have Last of the Gathering, which is just an all-out Pertwee epic. I believe this is a adaptation of the final game, or the last game, or whatever it was called, which was meant to be the last Doctor Who story for the third Doctor era. to feature the Third Doctor and Roger Delgado's Master. But unfortunately, Roger Delgado died in a car crash in Turkey, I believe, whilst filming Frontier in Space, so that never happened, unfortunately, and got replaced with Planet of Spiders, but has seen the light of the day in this fantastic book written by Mark Gatiss. Would highly recommend this one, especially if you're a Third Doctor fan. This one's just brilliant in my opinion, at a 9 out of 10. Festival of Death, have not read this one yet, but I'm very interested in doing so. It's a fan favourite from the past Doctor Adventure range. Fear of the Dark. Players, which is the start of the sort of Terrance Dicks sequel series in the books he did to the War Games. Decent one, that. Pretty good at 7 out of 10. Remembrance of the Daleks. Earthworld. Only Human, one that I'm quite interested in reading. Beautiful Chaos with a lovely cover art. The Silent Stars Go By, there, which is all of the 50th anniversary reprint. And then we have what I have of the Monster Collection range of books, of which I have 5. I don't have a complete set yet. Shakedown by Terrance Dicks, which is an absolute classic. Highly recommend this, 10 out of 10 read, fantastic stuff. Illegal Alien by Mike Tucker and Robert Perry, one I'm very interested in reading. Sting of the Zygons There by Stephen Cole. Corpse Marker by Chris Boucher, one that I'm very interested in reading, but Chris Boucher is a very divisive author with regards to the books, and I've only read one of his so far, which is science fiction, which wasn't that good. Sands of Time by Justin Richards there, one that I am pretty interested in reading as well. And then we have the history collection here. The Witch Hunters, probably have mentioned this already, but this is one of my favourite books of all time, adore that thing. Then we have the Roundheads here, which is actually signed by Fraser Hines, which I got signed in person. Fantastic read, really good. Second Doctor, historical story, really good. Then we have A Morality Tale here. This is a book that will shock and disturb you greatly. It's really graphic and probably a bit disturbing for some, but it is a fantastic read in my opinion, and is one of my all-time favourite Doctor Who books and books in general. I think this is a masterpiece by David Bishop, and it is absolutely fantastic, and I love the detailing of the bits of blood on some bits of the text there. I think that's a lovely little bit of attention to detail. But yeah, fantastic book this is, and this is actually based off of a real life event where this, I believe, pollution smog in London killed several hundred people a few hundred years ago, and this book is like a science fiction twist of that event that happened in London, and it is absolutely brilliant. One of my all-time favourite books. Really would highly recommend this. I think it's absolutely incredible, but do be warned, it is quite a graphic read, so it might be disturbing for some people. Then we have The English Way of Death here, one I've only read once and I thought it was okay, at 5 out of 10, not much a fan of it, but I would like to give it another go. Shadow in the Glass here by Stephen Cole and Justin Richards, and signed by Colin Baker. This is a fantastic 6th Doctor sci-fi historical story. Would recommend that one at an 8 out of 10, really like that one. Human Nature by Paul Cornell, another bit of an overrated one in my opinion. I think it's a pretty good read, but I would like to reread it. Then we have the Stone Rose and Dead of Winter at the end there. Bit of a smaller section now, and that is my Class, Torchwood and Single Faction Paradox book or books, which will sort of starts us up with the Doctor Who spin-off books, of which I have many. So let's begin. We have the 3 Class books here, with the Stone House by A.K. Benedict, one of my favourite books. Personally, I just love how mad and crazy and psychedelic and just bonkers this book is. I think it's fantastic. Joyride, which I thought was pretty good. And then the last Class book, which I actually haven't read yet, What She Does Next Will Astound You. And then we have my Torchwood books here. A lot of these interest me, however I only have read one so far, that being the first from the range, Another Life by Peter Anglehedes, which is not that good in my opinion, about a 4 out of 10. We have Torchwood Border Princess, Slow Decay, right? Something in the Water, Trace Memory, one that seems pretty interesting, as is this, The Twilight Streets by Gary Russell. Probably going to be a good one, that, as Gary Russell is amazing. Sky Point, one that does interest me quite a bit. Almost Perfect, which I've heard is pretty good. Pack Animals, that, another one by Peter Anglehedes. The Undertaker's Gift, which sounds really, really good. Bay of the Dead here, and then The House That Jack Built There, two ones that really do interest me. And then we have The Men Who Sold the World on the end there. And then my lone faction paradox book here, Of the City of the Saved. Alright then, we are now continuing with spin-off Doctor Who ranges of books with my Bernice Summerfield Virgin New Adventures and my Lethbridge Stewart books. So without further ado, let us begin over here with Oh No It Isn't by Paul Cornell, which is absolutely horrific in my opinion. This is one of only 2 Doctor Who books that I have read that scores a 0 out of 10. And unfortunately this section is bookended by both of them. The only thing I like about it is drive. Is some genuine moments of drive that are found very sporadically within the book, but there is nothing I like about this book. It is so unpleasant to read and it's absolutely awful, and I do not want to read it again. And as I said, it is one of only 2 Doctor Who books that I give a 0 out of 10. It is horrific. Beyond the Sun by Matthew Jones, which is a fantastic book in my opinion, 8 out of 10, really, really good stuff. Then we have Down by Lawrence Miles, which is the sort of beginning of the faction paradox, as he sort of made a trilogy in the Virgin books, Christmas on a Rational Planet, Down and Dead Romance, both sort of all hinted towards the faction paradox. Walking to Babylon by Kate Orman, one that I'm pretty interested in reading. I've heard this one's meant to be really good. Oblivion by Dave Stone, which has Rosalind Forrester on the cover from the Virgin book, so that should be pretty interesting. Dry Pilgrimage, which is a fantastic book in my opinion. 9 out of 10, deals with religion really, really well. Really like this one. I think it's a fantastic book. Would highly, highly recommend this one actually. Where Angels Fear by Rebecca Levine and Simon Winstone. Return to the Fractured Planet by Dave Stone. Another Girl, Another Planet by Martin Day and Len Beach. The aforementioned Dead Romance by Lawrence Miles. The Joy Device by Justin Richards. And then the end of the Virgin books, and Virgin books as a whole actually, with Twilight of the Gods there. And now we're moving on to the wonderful range of Lethbridge Stewart books, which is one of my favourite ranges of Doctor Who books actually. Beginning of the range, The Forgotten Son by Andy Frankham Allen, which is not only the beginning of the Lethbridge Stewart range of books, but it is also the first in the Great Intelligence trilogy that the Lethbridge Stewart ranges of books did, that are like a big trilogy sequel series to the 2 Yeti stories from Troughton's era, The Abominable Snowmen and The Web of Fear. Absolutely fantastic opener to that trilogy in my opinion, at a 9 out of 10. Would highly recommend this one, and the Great Intelligence trilogy as a whole. It is absolutely fantastic, and I have reviewed all 3, including this one. The Schizoid Earth by David A. McKinty. Beast of Fang Rock by Andy Frankham Allen. Mutually Assured Domination by Nick Walters there, which ends Series 1. Series 2 now with Moonblink by Sadie Miller. We have The Grandfather Infestation there by John Peel, which is a pretty good read in my opinion at a 7 out of 10. Then here we have The Showstoppers, which is meant to be absolutely amazing, and I was originally going to end the Skulls Dinner reviews on a review on this book at the Skulls Dinner reviews episode 70, but with the way I worded it and everything, I decided to conclude on episode 69 with a review on The Daughters of Earth, as I felt that this was that script was a much more sort of fitting way to end the series. But there we go, The Showstoppers, the finale to series 2 of Lethbridge Stewart books. Beginning of series 3 now with Time Squared. This is the second installment to the Great Intelligence trilogy. Basically, the Web of Fear set in New York, but with a bit more of a grittier approach. So kind of similar and samey book in some regards, but is still very enjoyable at an 8 out of 10. Blood of Atlantis there, and then Mind of Stone there, which is one I'm pretty damn interested in reading. And then we have Night of the Intelligence here, which is not only the conclusion to the Lethbridge Stewart Great Intelligence trilogy with The Forgotten Son and Time Squared, but the sort of whole conclusion to the Great Intelligence as a whole, in my opinion. The second half is absolutely amazing for concluding the whole Great Intelligence story, but the first half I found to have quite a few pacing issues. It was a really good book overall at a 7 out of 10, and if you like the Great Intelligence as a villain, I would highly recommend this trilogy here. It is an absolutely fantastic and worthwhile read and continuation to what is my favourite Doctor Who villain of all time, the Great Intelligence there. And then we have almost the complete flip side of my opinions on the Great Intelligence with The Daughters of Earth by Sarah Grenawegen. I have one copy here which doesn't have a sticker for a title, and then one which has a sticker for a title here, which is pretty weird. I ordered a bunch of books off of Candy Jar a while ago, and they sent me 2 copies of The Daughters of Earth, the one without the sticker and this one with the sticker. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff, that bit of an oddity in the book collection. But yeah, as I said, this in my opinion is kind of almost the flip side with regards to my opinions on Night of the Intelligence, where I think the first half is absolutely amazing, but the second half is very underwhelming. Like, the first half is about a 10 out of 10 in my opinion, but the second half drags it down to a 5, which is really disappointing in my opinion. Then we have the beginning of series 5 with A Very Private Haunting, the exclusive edition from the Candy Jar website, which has bonus content to it. Same with this here, The New Unusual, also the exclusive edition. Very interested in reading A Very Private Haunting. And then we have the other 0 out of 10 book that I have read with regards to Doctor Who books, and that is the Lucy Wilson Mysteries Avatars of the Intelligence, which is a spin-off of the Lethbridge Stewart range of books. And this is my least favourite Doctor Who book and the worst book I have ever read in my life. This is Candy Jar going, hey, do you recognise Nardal? Do you recognise Bill Potts? Do you know the Brigadier? Do you know the Great Intelligence? Well, buy this book, buy this range. This is overall nothing more than a stupid marketing scheme by Candy Jar to try and get gullible buyers and readers to read and buy the Lucy Wilson Mysteries. There is literally nothing good about this book at all. Everything in it is absolutely horrific and awful. The characters are the worst I have ever seen in any Doctor Who story. It does a complete disservice and misuse of my favourite Doctor Who villain of all time, the Great Intelligence. Everything about this book and everything about it is absolutely horrific. It has about as much depth as a puddle. It is just absolutely abhorrent, this book, and a 0 out of 10 cannot even begin to do justice as to how bad this book is, in my opinion. This is my least favourite Doctor Who story of all time, and it is unbelievably horrific and is the worst thing I have ever experienced in the entire canon of Doctor Who. Alright then, we now transition from the spin-off Doctor Who books into what I have of Doctor Who novella books, which I have a fair amount of, as you can see. So sort of nicely transitioning us now, we have the Lethbridge Stewart Candy Jar spin-off novellas that they published. To my knowledge, only 4 of these have ever been done, of which there's a complete set of them here. And all of them are limited to 400 copies each. And I have all of them, as well as a bonus copy of another one, as Candy Jar sent me an additional one of the Lost Skin by accident. But starting off, we have The Life of Evans there, which wasn't that good in my opinion, thought it was pretty bad. The Flaming Soldier of Rare by Christopher Bryant, one I am very interested in reading, seemed really good. Travers and Wells by Robert Manmone. I've recently developed a love for H.G. Wells, the actual author's work, so it should be an interesting read, that. Then we have the 2 copies of The Lost Skin there. As I mentioned, Candy Jar sent me 2 copies of these by accident, so there we go. Just haven't done anything with the additional or spare copy yet. But yeah, quite interested in reading this one. All of these sort of interest me, as it were. Probably will get around to reading all of them soon. Telos Novellas now with the deluxe of Time and Relative, which is a fantastic 1960s Doctor Who story, an excellent prequel to An Unearthly Child. So if you like 1960s Doctor Who, this is a must read in my opinion, as it isn't the best thing in the world, but it is such a nice and wonderful sort of prequel type of story to An Unearthly Child. About an 8 out of 10. I think it's great. Citadel of Dreams by Dave Stone, which is a deluxe edition once again. Foreign Devils, which is another deluxe edition there. Deluxe of Riptide there, one I'm quite interested in reading. Wonderland by Mark Chadbourne, again deluxe. Shell Shock Deluxe. The Cabinet of Light Deluxe, one of the very few Doctor Who books I have read twice, an absolute favourite of mine. It's fantastic and is a prequel to the Time Hunter spin-off range Telos Publishing did, so which I'll showcase in a minute. But yeah, this is absolutely fantastic, one of my all-time favourites. Has a unspecified incarnation of the Doctor in it. Fallen Gods, standard edition and deluxe edition there, which looks absolutely amazing there. Very interested in reading that one. I think this is like the most popular Doctor Who Telos novella there is. Frayed, standard edition and deluxe edition there. Only read part of this, it was absolutely awful and very graphic as well. The Eye of the Tiger, which is a very nice short read, and at only about 70 pages, almost a short story. But yeah, this is fantastic, really, really good stuff. Would recommend that one. Companion Piece, which was also really, really good stuff. That's just a standard edition there, and that's a deluxe edition there. So then we have the underwhelming and overrated Time Hunter series, which is one that I was really eager in exploring and reading, but I just was so underwhelmed by it, and I find it to be a very overrated range, as I think, despite being a rather anonymous range, I think it is quite well liked at the same time, so that makes it a bit overrated in my opinion. We have the winning side here, the opener to the range by Lance Parkin, which is actually a really nice little opener, nothing amazing, but it's pretty good, 7 out of 10. The Tunnel at the End of the Light, which is a deluxe edition. Awful, I really don't like that one. The Clockwork Woman, which wasn't as bad as Tunnel at the End of the Light, but still a pretty bad read in my opinion. Another deluxe edition. Same with Kit Sign here, another deluxe edition. This one is actually really good, really enjoyed that one, 7 out of 10. Severed Man Deluxe, this is my favourite out of the Time Hunter range, and is the only one to score an 8 out of 10 or higher aside from Cabinet of Light. And then here we have Echoes, which is a continuation of the Severed Man, as this is the only two-parter in the range, and it barely does any justice to that. It isn't a very good continuation of the Severed Man. The Severed Man ties itself up really nicely and has a very tacked on cliffhanger to Echoes here. It's very forced of a two-parter if you asked me, and this continuation Echoes here isn't that good at all. Didn't like that one. Same here with Peculiar Lives, pretty bad. That's another deluxe. Deus Revolt, only read part of this, it was awful. The Albino's Dancer, which I'm yet to read. Sideways Door, which I have read, was pretty good. Feels very like much like a tie-up and a setup. Tie-up of the range and a setup to the finale of the range. So I think that one needs to be read in order. Then we have a paperback edition of the ultra rare Child of Time there, which is a very rare book, and I haven't read this one yet, but I am kind of interested in doing so, but not holding high expectations, because the Time Hunter range is a pretty bad range of books in my opinion. I wouldn't really recommend it. I would maybe recommend The Severed Man on its own, that's really good, and I would probably just recommend you get this one on its own and read that along with The Cabinet of Light, but it's not that good of a range. I wouldn't really recommend it, and as I said, the only real two that I would recommend highly or strongly is The Severed Man and The Cabinet of Light, as other good ones in here like Kit Sign and Winning Side are only like 7 out of 10 worthy, so it's a really underwhelming range, but Severed Man and Cabinet of Light are fantastic, and I would recommend those.
Alrighty then, we are now moving on to the Doctor Who short story compilation books. So without further ado, let us get started. So over here on the left we have Lineage, Lethbridge Stewart, which is a anthological look back on Lethbridge Stewart's family tree. Decalogue 2, Lost Property, which was published by Virgin, I believe. Pretty cool thing here, Time Shadows, a short story anthology benefiting the Able Community Foundation. This is a book I bought at a stall at Dimensions 2016, which had a little sort of slip of paper next to it, sort of advertising Time Shadows itself, the sort of anthology. And to top all of that off, one of the authors of the short stories in here was actually running the stall and selling the book, so I got it signed by Stephen Hatcher. So then here we have Doctor Who Time Lord Fairy Tales. They've done a couple books like this. This is the only one I have. Pretty cool. And then here we have 12 Doctors, 12 Stories. Then we've got a couple of other sort of random ones before we move into the sort of main bulk of the short story compilations. We have Torchwood, Consequences, and then we have the BBC making money with, or trying to make money rather, with the Legends of a Shielder, and then possibly the same thing with the Legends of River Song there. And then here we have the sort of main bulk of the short story compilations. Now, quite a while ago, Big Finish was not only producing Doctor Who audio dramas, but they also produced quite a bit of short story compilations, primarily Doctor Who ones, as well as Bernice Summerfield ones on the side. I'm not 100% sure how many Bernice Summerfield ones they did overall, but in their short trips line of Doctor Who books, which was their short story collections, from about 2000 to 2009, they released 29 installments of this range overall. The first 28 were all original stories, were all volumes with original stories, and the 29th was just essentially a greatest hits compilation. What you're looking at here is one of those Bernice Summerfield short story compilations, as well as a complete set of the Doctor Who short trips books, bar the 29th greatest hits compilation. So we have my only Bernice Summerfield short story comp, that is Life During Wartime. And then here we have the Doctor Who ones with Zodiac. All of the Doctor Who ones have a overall theme to them that all of the short stories will follow. And for example, this one's about the 7 Zodiac symbols. This second one here is about companions, and then this third one here is about horror and what have you, a universe of terrors. And then here we have the Muses, Steel Skies, Past Tense That, which has quite an interesting misprint. So as you can see by the spines of the dust jackets here, Short Trips Steel Skies is meant to be the 5th one in the Doctor Who line, and Past Tense is meant to be the 6th one, as it's sort of meant to be. But if we were to take the dust jackets off the books themselves and look at the spines of the actual books, as you can see here, there's a misprint on my Past Tense where it says number 5 on the spine, whereas it's actually the 6th. And then there's my copy of Steel Skies there with the number 5 on the spine. Then we have the 7th instalment of the range with Life Science, which is an absolutely amazing cover in my opinion. And one of the other things that I love about the Big Finish Doctor Who short trip books is that the covers to them, particularly when we get to the sort of end of the range, are just fantastic all round, and they're probably my favourite range of Doctor Who books just with regards to the cover arts. I just absolutely love the cover arts to them personally. Probably quite a tough call between the Target books actually, but either way, I digress. Then we have Repercussions there, the 8th instalment, Numero 9, Monsters, 10th 2040, and here we have the first of the quadrilogy of Christmas short trip books with a Christmas treasury. If you're looking into getting the Big Finish Doctor Who short trip books, I will warn you that the Christmas ones are the hardest ones to get. 7 Deadly Sins there, which was actually the first Big Finish short trips book I bought. A Day in the Life, the Solar System, and here we have the second, the History of Christmas. Farewells, absolutely adore the cover to that one. The Centenarian, another one that I adore the cover to, Time's Signature Voix. Then here we have Dalek Empire, which is actually a short story compilation that actually ties into the Big Finish Dalek Empire audio range, so yeah, pretty unique. Destination Prague with another amazing cover. Ditto with Snapshots, adore that cover. Thirdly, we have the Ghosts of Christmas, which might be the rarest Christmas one, I'm not 100% sure. Then here we have Defining Patterns, The Quality of Leadership, Transmissions, How the Doctor Changed My Life, one of my all-time favourite Doctor Who book covers. And then here we have Christmas Around the World, the 4th and final Christmas Doctor Who short story anthology by Big Finish. And here we have the finale, Indefinable Magic there, which has an absolutely incredible cover. And fun fact, the first story out of this Power Supply, I believe it's called, or the Power Supply, was the first and currently only instalment to my series Transmissions on the channel, which I may look into sort of reviving or playing around with the concept of. But yeah, there was that. All of my Doctor Who short story compilation books, primarily consisting of all of these lovely, gorgeous Big Finish books. And now we have the sort of grouping together of all of my miscellaneous and non-fiction Doctor Who books. So let's get us started with some more Telos books and Telos Deluxes here. Let me zoom out a bit. There we go, much better. So we have the Target book,
David J. Howe 2016 hardback edition, and this is a very unique and special item in my collection. I got this particular book back in Dimensions of 2016, the year it was sort of published, and I bought it from a stall ran by David J. Howe of Telos Publishing, and I managed to get it signed in dedication to my 18th birthday by him, as I went to Dimensions 2016 for my 18th birthday. Then we have another big boy here. We have the Target book Super Deluxe Edition by Telos, which is the one with the special Tom Baker theme. It is signed by Howe and Tom Baker, and I did an unboxing of that quite a while ago. It was the video before my 1960s collection 2018. Then we have the Early Years Deluxe there. Then we have the two Telos Publishing Deluxes of the Barry Newbury Signature Collection there. Then we have the Raymond P. Cusick Signature Collection down there, which I believe is slightly rarer than the Barry Newbury Signature Collection. Both are very, very, very rare books, these deluxe editions. Then we have Back to the Vortex Telos Publishing Deluxe, which is a sort of a book about the return of Doctor Who in 2005. And this one is quite an interesting book actually, because if we were to open it up to the sort of autograph page, we have the autograph of Philip David Segal, who contributed a bit to the book, I believe, the foreword. And it's interesting to have this because Philip David Segal was the person behind the TV movies. Then we have Telos Talkback the 60s Deluxe there, which is a fantastic sort of interview compilation of people from the 1960s. We also did one on the 70s and 80s in paperback and hardback. The 60s is the easiest hardback to get, as it's still in print on the Telos website, I think, but the other two hardbacks are out of print. Then we have the Audio Adventures of Big Finished script book, Volume 1 there, Volume 2 there, and then Volume 4 here, which focuses on the Monsters and Villains trilogy they did around the 50th monthly range release. I don't have the third one, and I got these all at the same time in a charity shop. Then we have some script books with The Tribe of Gum by Anthony Coburn. These are the Titan script books, or some of them. The Daleks, The Masters of Luxor, which is an incredible read, one of my favourite Doctor Who books. The Crusade there. Galaxy 4, The Power of the Daleks, and The Daemons there. Then we have the script of the film there, and then a couple miscellaneous sort of Target books here, novelisation, miscellaneous bits. I suppose I could have included this in the Target paperback section, but these are sort of more miscellaneous than anything in my opinion. Then we have here the BBC published novelisation of the TV movie. Then we have the junior edition of The Brain of Morbius Target novelisation that Terrance Dicks did. The Doctor Who crossword book. Then here we have Peter Davidson's book of Alien Planets here. Then The Adventures of K9 and Other Mechanical Creatures by Terrance Dicks there. And then the Making of Doctor Who. We have Mark Campbell, the episode guide, which is a really outdated edition of it. The complete guide, fully revised and updated by Mark Campbell, which goes up to, I think, the first half of Series 7. I'm not 100% sure, but either way, this is one of my all-time favourite Doctor Who books, and I would highly recommend it, particularly this edition here, as it's the most up-to-date and current to my knowledge.
And here we have a few more Doctor Who guidebooks, starting off with a sort of older edition of the Mark Campbell The Episode Guide, which is an extremely early edition of the book. This is actually before any news of the revival at all, really. This was way before the revival of New Doctor Who, as this was published in 2000, this edition apparently. But yeah, it's still pretty cool to have, and I absolutely love the Mark Campbell episode guide, so that's really cool to have. Then here we have I Who's Who, the unauthorised guide to Doctor Who novels and audios. By this particular volume actually goes over all of the Bernice Summerfield Virgin New Adventure books, all 21 of them, as well as other things Bernice Summerfield appeared in at the time of this book. This is the middle instalment of a trilogy of I Who 2 books, all of which are very, very rare, and I was lucky enough to track this down for £4 in a charity shop whilst on holiday. So yeah, pretty cool to have, and I would love to try and track down the other 2 books in this series at some point, but that probably would be quite tricky to do as they are rare books. But yeah, I'm still really happy to have this in the collection, and it does make a interesting read. And here we have this little oddity. This is the Doctor Who Programme Guide, Volume 1, the programmes, which is like this guide thing the Target company published back in the day as like a guide to Doctor Who. And the really cool thing about this copy, as you can see, is the fact that this copy is hand signed to the very top of the cover by Patrick Troughton. Then here we have Inside the TARDIS, the Worlds of Doctor Who, which is a similar thing to these, another sort of step-by-step guide. Then here we have the Universal Data Bank there, the 3rd Doctor Handbook, and then the 4th Doctor Handbook published by Virgin there. The complete history portion of my collection. Would love to have all of the 1960s ones. We have Volume 1, Volume 3, Volume 5, Volume 6, Volume 8, Volume 11, Volume 17, 22, 23, 51, 52, 55, 71 and 76 there, and then we have the Time Traveller's Guide by Peter Hanning on the end. Alright, then we now move on to the second part of my Doctor Who non-fiction books, with Doctor Who The Vault, Treasures from the First 50 Years, which is quintessential Doctor Who book in my opinion. Pretty much everybody would say that this is such a fantastic guide to the first 50 years of the show. Then here we have 50 Years, The Essential Guide, which was gifted to me as a birthday gift back in 2013, I think. Then here we have The Encyclopedia by Gary Russell. Then here we have Doctor Who The Inside Story. And here we have Doctor Who The Secret Lives of Monsters by Justin Richards. Doctor Who 100 Scariest Monsters, Connecting Who Artificial Beings, which is a book that sort of looks back with regards to the origins of Doctor Who's monsters in terms of how they were created and what sort of inspired their creation. Very interested in reading that one. Then here we have the Book of Lists, Whoology there, which is another essential Doctor Who book in my opinion. Who on Earth is Tom Baker, an autobiography. I actually was going to get a secondary copy of this book, which was actually hand signed by Tom Baker from a second-hand bookshop in their collector's section, but that fell through as I wanted to put my money towards a Doctor Who Telos Novella 8-book deluxe bundle. So that never happened. The Doctor Who's Who in hardback and paperback. Then here we have Blue Box Boy by Matthew Waterhouse, a memoir of Doctor Who in 4 episodes, which I bought from his stall at a Belfast Comic Con a couple of years ago now, and got him to hand sign it, which is pretty cool. Here we have some Doctor Who quiz books. I know I showcased these new series ones sort of earlier in a different section, but I thought I'd showcase them again here just to showcase all of the quiz books. Quiz book 1, 2, 3 and 4. As I said, all of these were sort of published as tie-ins to the new series.
Then here we have the Doctor Who official quiz book by Jacqueline Rayner. The Lethbridge Stewart quiz book. The Doctor Who quiz book of dinosaurs. Why this is a thing, I have no idea, and I'm not quite sure why I have it either. Doctor Who, the Time Lord letters there. Wasn't quite sure where to put this one. And here we have a couple cool things here. We have 2 copies of the 1965 Doctor Who annual. This one here is in absolutely incredible condition, and this one here is in lesser condition, but it is signed by Sir William Hartnell. So just to showcase this autographed copy off, we have sort of a clipped price in the corner down here, and then there we have William Hartnell's autograph on the left up there, and it just goes on into the main annual itself there. As you can see, not the best condition in the world, and my other copy is in better condition, but I got this for just under 90 quid, so I couldn't really be complaining really. And here we have something really cool, and that is this thing here. Basically a few years ago now, this website, I believe the Who Shop or Galaxy 4, something like that, printed exclusive paperback reproductions of the Doctor Who 1968, 1969 and 1970 annuals for collectors who were struggling to get those annuals in paperback format, of which this is one of them. And to make things even cooler, only 3 copies of each paperback reproduction annual were printed, and that is one of them, making it the rarest book in my collection. The Doctor Who Annual 1975, 78, 79, and here we have a bit of an interesting one. The 1981 Annual without Annual 1981 written on the front there. I believe this is an international copy for international selling. And then here we have a 1981 Annual here with Annual 1981 written on the front there. Which I believe is a UK edition of the annual. Then here we have, I don't quite know what year this is, but a Peter Davidson annual, maybe another international copy. And then here we have the annual 1985, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2 2009s, 2 2010s, and 2 2011s. Right. Then we have 12, 13, 15, and 16 there. And then we have the Storybooks 2008 and 2009 there. Alright, then we now move on to the final 4 sections of this book collection video, with the Stephen King books, the Dean Koontz books, the Miscellaneous Non-Doctor Who books, and the non-Doctor Who science fiction books as well. Some of this collection here will be going, as I am considering selling quite a portion of this collection you see here, particularly what I have of the Stephen King books. I'm recording this clip on the 26th of November, and by the time this video comes out on the 26th of December, some of this collection will probably be sold on, because there's a lot of it that I don't really see myself getting around to reading at all, and you're probably thinking with that, well, why do you have so many? Well, the thing is, particularly with Stephen King, a lot of his books interested me, and I was able to find them all for really cheap, so I just decided to get them, and I just ended up not becoming a fan of him, to be honest. This is mainly because I found him to be a bit of a pretentious author, to be honest. I quite enjoyed some of his shorter books like Carrie and Gwendy's Button Box, a collaboration with Richard Shizmar, but other books like The Shining, which I've read in its entirety, and Desperation, which I've only read part of, I found to be very pretentious and very wordy, and just not a lot happening in them, to be honest. So I'm thinking of selling the majority of this Stephen King collection. I might keep like some of the shorter ones like Carrie, Button Box, and the Bachman books, and Skeleton Crew, which are novella collections, and maybe a couple others as well. But yeah, I'm just not much a fan of Stephen King, to be honest, and I will be selling this collection on, or at least the majority of it, as well as some of the more newer Dean Koontz books and some of the miscellaneous Doctor Who, non-Doctor Who books, such as the Lord of the Rings here. But either way, it's enough of my sort of preemptive ramblings. Let's get on with my non-Doctor Who books by starting off with the Stephen King books. So as per usual, I will be showing these books in chronological order, roughly. And some of these books here are so big to the point where they can fit on the top shelf here. So I've done 2 rows of rough chronological order of Stephen King books. So starting things off, we have this edition of The Stand, which I believe was the first edition that was complete and uncut. Firestarter, quite a nice cover. Cujo. Pet Cemetery, which is a movie tie-in. Christine. A newer paperback of It, and a older edition paperback of It, which I managed to get for 27p in a charity shop. Misery paperback, and The Dark Half paperback. Insomnia hardback. Bag of Bones hardback. For Buick 8 hardback. One of the ones I'm thinking of keeping, the Bachman books, that, which is quite a rare one because I can't quite remember which story it is. I think it might have been Rage, caused this book to become quite controversial, as this particular edition of the book was published not too long before the Columbine High School massacre shooting, and Rage had implications of like high school shootings or something like that, and as such subsequent editions of this book have had that short story cut out, I believe. Lizzie's story 11/22/63, which is a sort of time travel book based around the JFK assassination. Mr. Mercedes Revival. Finders Keepers, and End of Watch there, with the outsider on the end here, which has quite a nice thing on the page edges there. As you can see, it's got the silhouette from the cover sort of printed on the edge of the pages there, which is pretty cool. Second row now, we have Carrie, which was a great read. The start of it with the sort of whole gym scene and her having her first period was like a bit weird, and I was kind of like, oh, I don't know where this is going kind of start, but it overall turned out to be a great read, and yeah, great book, and the movie is really good as well, the original one. Then we have The Shining here, which interested me a lot, as the Stanley Kubrick movie adaptation is one of my favourite movies of all time, and in my opinion this book, it was alright. It had moments to it, but I did find the overall thing pretty pretentious, as it tries to build up and have really long sequences of character development and what have you that just seemed really inconsequential in my opinion, and this book didn't age well in terms of a read for myself personally, because a little while after I read The Shining, I read this book here, Intensity by Dean Koontz, which was trying to do a similar thing with the characterization in terms of really long build-up type of characterization, but that one was actually good, unlike The Shining here. So in that scenario, The Shining didn't really age well, and it's not that good in my opinion either. It's a bit average. Did have some pretty decent moments to it, and I do like the kind of build up there is in like the first half. Like their car journey that's just shown the end of at the start of the movie is a lot more built up and fleshed out. But yeah, it was an alright read, a bit pretentious and a bit wordy, I would have said. Just, it was alright. Then here we have Misery, which is kind of what I was feeling when I was reading this next book here, Desperation, which also accurately describes my feelings when reading this book. Very pretentious read, I would have said, and I got like 330 pages in, and out of like 550 pages, and it was just so pretentious, loads of characters just yappering to themselves. Just nothing was happening in this book in my opinion, and I gave up on it admittedly, which I very rarely do for books, but I just gave up on this one. It was just very pretentious and just nothing happening. I do not understand the liking for this book at all, to be honest with you. Then here we have its twin, The Regulators, which I will say do have quite nice covers, I would have said. Particularly like how the same scene in this circle here is seen by the eye of the lizard on the front of The Regulators there, and I do like the similar sort of backings to them as well, which is pretty cool. Then here I didn't quite know where to put this one, but we have another Stephen King / Richard Bachman book, being Blaze, Cell, Doomarkey, Skeleton Crew. Again, I don't really quite know where to put this one. Same with these ones here, the little novellas, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, Gwendy's Button Box by Stephen King and Richard Shizmar, which was actually a really good read in my opinion. I really did enjoy this one, and I think I will probably keep this one as I love the sort of cover to it and everything, and it was a really good read. I really liked the idea that one had to it. It was only a 7 out of 10, but I did quite enjoy it. Then here we have Elevation, which was supposedly a sequel, like a loose sequel to Gwendy's Button Box, but it wasn't at all really, and it was just absolutely awful in my opinion. Then here we have the Dark Tower books, The Gunslinger, The Drawing of the Free, The Wastelands, The Wizard and Glass, The Wind Through the Keyhole, The Wolves of the Calla, Songs of Susanna, and The Dark Tower self-titled here at the end there. And so there we go, there was my Stephen King book portion of this video. And now here we have all of my Dean Koontz books that I have in the collection, and out of the two I much prefer Dean Koontz as over to Stephen King, I would have said personally, as I'll get into. And similar sort of thing, a lot of his books interested me and I managed to find them for cheap, like Stephen King's. And I will be selling some of these books, namely the last 4 I will be showcasing, so False Memory, The Taking the Face and Velocity, just because I actually got these 4 here in a bundle with this Coldfire hardback and this Intensity hardback, and I really wanted Coldfire, but the cheapest way to get the book in hardback was to actually buy the bundle, so I got these 4 sort of excess books I didn't really want at the same time in the bundle. I just mainly got it for Coldfire and the Intensity hardback as well, but I will be showcasing these in original chronological order now of release. Now what I mean by that, particularly with the first 2 I will be showcasing, Dean Koontz used to publish quite a few books under quite a few different pseudonyms, and eventually would rework the same books later on and republish them underneath his name of Dean Koontz, such as The Chase here was originally published as a book by Lee Nichols, a pseudonym he adopted, and much later on after its original printing, so he republished it and reworked it slightly as Dean Koontz, I think, or something along the lines of that much later on. And I won't be showcasing these books in the chronological order of when he did all of these reworkings. I will just be showcasing these books in the chronological order of when these books were originally chronologically republished, reworkings and what have you notwithstanding. So without further ado, let me showcase this Dean Koontz book collection. So here we have Chase, which is in this sort of paperback edition there. Then here we have Icebound. One that does sound pretty good. As you can see, the books here are pretty tight. Then here we have Night Chills, The Key to Midnight, The Funhouse, my most recent read with Dean Koontz being The Mask, which had a really good idea to it, but at the end of the book he just didn't really seem like to know what to do with the idea, to be honest with you. It was an alright read, and it was still pretty good, but a little underwhelming at the same time. And then here we have The House of Thunder, which has quite a discolorized spine. Then here we have a paperback edition of The Servants of Twilight, which has a very nice sort of silvery cover. You can even see me in the reflection. Then here we have one I'm pretty interested in reading, Lightning. And then we have Midnight, which is another one that I have read, and one I actually have scripted a review for. So a review on this will be coming out fairly soon, as I think this will be the second episode of Fox Reviews Season 2, or maybe it's the third one. So yeah, similar thing to my opinions on the Lethbridge Stewart books, Knights of the Intelligence and The Daughters of Earth, if you've watched those sections, where I felt the start of the book was really good, had a really sort of nice creepy sort of setup, but kind of lost me in the second half of it. Had a lot of great ideas and what have you to it, and a lot of interesting elements of horror, and had a really good setup. But overall, the book just was a bit underwhelming and a bit average in my opinion. I absolutely love the world building in that, though, personally. I think the world building in this is just 10 out of 10. And then here we have The Bad Place. Then one that I'm definitely could be getting rid of. This extremely redundant 3-in-1 hardback edition of Lightning, Midnight and The Bad Place. Need I say why I'm getting rid of it? Then here we have the aforementioned Cold Fire, an extremely nice looking cover, one I'm very interested in reading. Same with Hideaway here. Then we have paperback edition of Dragon Tears, very discolorized spine edition of Winter Moon. And then here we have hardback edition of Intensity, and the first Koontz book I read, the paperback edition of Intensity. Absolutely incredible psychological thriller novel in my opinion. I was introduced to Dean Koontz by TJ Productions, and based off of his recommendation, this was the first one I read, and it was absolutely incredible. 9 out of 10 book in my opinion. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I would highly recommend Intensity. It's a fantastic book. Then here we have the 4 that I'm thinking of selling on. False Memory, The Taking, with quite a reflexive cover again, The Face, and then one that just simply couldn't fit on here, Velocity Rare. And there's what I have currently of Dean Koontz's books for this section of this collection video. Alright then, we are now moving on to part of the non-Doctor Who miscellaneous books that I have. Starting off, we have Daft Punk's A Trip Inside the Pyramid, the story of Radiohead Exit Music, then moving on to some fiction books, Sherlock Holmes, The Hound of the Baskervilles, The Valley of Fear there. Then here we have the Lord of the Rings trilogy with the Fellowship of the Ring, forgot what it was called there, The Two Towers, and then Return of the King there. And then we have Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, A couple of Richard Lehman books here which I'm going to sew on. Blood Games, Night in the Lonesome October, All Hallows Eve, The Beast House There, and then James Herbert's The Rats, and Leia there. And here we have American Gods by Neil Gaiman, another one I'm going to sew on. And here we have one that I've read a bit of, Irish Ghost Stories, which is a short story compilation of, Irish ghost stories. And it is really good actually, quite enjoying this one.
Another quick little insert clip here. We have these 5 Anthony Horowitz horror story short books. All of these books here are less than 100 pages long and all have like 2 to 3, maybe 4 short horror stories contained within them, and I mainly got all of these purely because I remember really enjoying and liking this one here, The Night Bus, when I was a child, and I have very good memories reading this book, so out of nostalgia I kind of bought all of these again, and they are really cool to have. And a few months ago I read Twist Cottage and it was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, 5 Anthony Horowitz short horror story books, yeah, pretty cool.
Then here we have a couple furry books on the end here, because why the hell not. My only full-length furry book, Waterways by Kyle Gold.
But before we get too deep into the furriness, I also have this book on how to draw them, because why the hell not?
Furries Among Us. Basically this is a collection of sort of essays by members of the fandom that sort of give a detailed sort of overlook to the fandom as a whole, and it is quite an interesting read, I would have said, overall. And there's a couple of sections here and there that didn't really interest me, but in terms of like an insight into the fandom, this is a fantastic read. And I've also got its sequel, which I am yet to read, Furries Among Us 2. Quite an interesting cover. And we have one that I recently got for my birthday, Furry Nation, The True Story of America's Most Misunderstood Subculture by Joe Strike. One that I am very interested in reading, as this is written by a older member of the fandom, or a grey muzzle as they're known as, I believe. But yeah, really interested in reading this one actually. Seems like it's going to be really good, and I have heard really positive things about that one. And here we have quite a few books that I originally wasn't going to include in this big collection video, mainly because I thought they wouldn't really fit into the grander thematic nature and sort of concept, as it were, for the video being sort of this big sort of science fiction and horror book collection video. But I thought it'd be cool to feature them nonetheless, as this video is kind of me trying to feature all of the books I would have in my collection. So I'm just going to very briefly mention these 24 books here in this small little bit at the end of this miscellaneous section of my non-Doctor Who books. So here we have a 10 book box set of the first 10 Alex Rider books, which all come in this lovely big cardboard box set. This was reduced all the way down to £15 because it was damaged in my local The Works, and I decided to get this as I had listened to audiobooks of the Alex Rider books, of namely the first 6 when I was a kid, and remembered greatly enjoying them, as well as the graphic novel and movie adaptations of Stormbreaker. So I kind of decided to pick up this box set as, in a way, it's a big sort of nostalgia trip for myself. And out of all of these, I've only read Stormbreaker so far, and I've got to say it's possibly my read of the year. So in the box set we have Stormbreaker, Point Blanc, Skeleton Key, Eagle Strike, Scorpia, Archangel, which is the 6th that I listened to on audiobook when I was a kid, Snakehead, Crocodile Tears, and Scorpio Rising with Russian Roulette on the end there. And here we have a book series that I have read all the way through when I was a kid, and I decided to keep these books as they were pretty sentimental for me. We have the Lemony Snicket, A Series of Unfortunate Events books with The Bad Beginning, The Reptile Room, The Wide Window, The Miserable Mill, The Ostara Academy, The Ezrat Elevator, The Vile Village, The Hostile Hospital, The Carnivorous Carnival, The Slippery Slope, The Grim Grotto, The Penultimate Peril, and The End There, with a very random book by the name of The Kestrel in the Crane by Rod Adler on the end there. Alright then, we now move on into what is the final section for this collection video, which is all of my non-Doctor Who science fiction books. So without further ado, let us begin. So starting off up here, we have Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle in this really nice hardback edition published by Galansk, publisher of the many SF Masterworks books that you will see in this video. Then we have a hardback SF Masterworks edition of Frank Herbert's Dune, which is a book I'm very interested in reading but kind of scared to at the same time, because I have heard that you need a bit of brain power to read that book because of what's going on in it. But yeah, I'm really interested in giving this book, Dune, a try someday or soon, because I have heard that Denis Villeneuve, the director and maker of Blade Runner 2049, is adapting this into one, maybe two movies. Then speaking of Blade Runner, we have this movie tie-in edition of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is the novel that the whole franchise is based off of, again by Philip K. Dick. I've read this once, I thought it was okay, but I would personally like to give it another try sometime next year. And then we have all of my SF Masterworks books, other than my Dune book, which goes from here all the way up to here, with Philip K. Dick's A Scanner Darkly, one that I'm very interested in reading, has a really strong sounding synopsis to it, really quite interested in reading that one actually. Then we have Ubik, if that's how you pronounce that one, A Maze of Death, which I've read and that was really good, I would actually recommend that one. Valis, and then The Penultimate Truth there. And that's all of my Philip K. Dick books that I have. Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, really interested in reading that one. Danielle Keyes' Flowers for Algernon. Roger Zelazny's Lord of Light, one that I'm very interested in reading. William Gibson and Bruce Sterling's The Difference Engine. Ursula K. Le Guin's The Word for World is Forest, which I read earlier this year and I didn't think it was that good. Arthur C. Clarke, The City and the Stars, one that I enjoyed quite a bit. If you're into your Doctor Who novels like myself, like the Past Doctor Adventures and Virgin New Adventures and what have you, I would recommend this one, as it almost feels like a prototype, as it were, to all of those books, because it has a very sort of similar pace and feel to it, in my opinion. Then we have Rendezvous with Rama, which is another Arthur C. Clarke book. This one sounds like it could have been inspiration for the Doctor Who new-parter, The Empty Child and the Doctor Dancers. Struggled to think of a name for it there for a second. But yeah, really interested in reading that one. Walter Tevis's The Man Who Fell to Earth. Jack Finney's The Body Snatchers, which I recently read, thought it was okay. Arkady and Boris Stragatsky's Roadside Picnic, one that I'm very interested in reading. Harold Clement's Mission of Gravity. And then we have Martian Time Slip here by Philip K. Dick, one I forgot about. Downward to Earth by Robert Silverberg. And then Larry Niven's Ringworld there. Then we have my sort of H.G. Wells section with The Time Machine, which was great. First Men on the Moon and Food of the Gods there, which are other SF Masterworks editions. Really interested in reading those. Then we have The Island of Dr. Moreau, The Invisible Man, And then another edition of The Invisible Man here, which is a really old edition of the book, as you might be able to tell. I found this in a charity shop for £2, and I'm a bit of a collector of books, so I decided to get this as I thought, why not, as it was only £2. And this, as a fun fact, is actually the oldest book in my entire collection, as this edition comes from 1938, which is pretty unbelievable. So yeah, a pretty cool thing to have in the collection, that I would have said, and I hugely enjoy and love the Invisible Man book, so it's even cooler to have that. Then here we have quite a few editions of the War of the Worlds, a few hardbacks of it here. Might go into a bit of detail as to why I have so many at some point in another video on the channel. And here we have a double edition of the Time Machine and the War of the Worlds. Then we have George Orwell's Animal Farm, and then here we have Down and Out in Paris and London, which isn't exactly science fiction, I don't think, but I wasn't really sure where else to put it. Then The Big Titan there, 1984. Then Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, and then the first 3 publicated books in the Foundation series, with Foundation, a book that I am currently reading at the moment, and I think it is really good so far, actually. Pretty decent little read, very good world building to it, and I am quite interested in checking out the next books, Foundation and Empire, and second Foundation there. The really cool thing about these books, or these editions of these books that I have, is that they all connect together to form sort of one big sort of sprawling cover art, which is really, really cool, and yeah, really cool, and I really like this. It's a nice sort of thing for the collection to have, and it is a stunning piece of artwork overall for these books. Really, really nice looking. And on the end here we have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, probably the first science fiction novel ever written. Clifford D. Simak's A Choice of Gods, Inverted Rolled by Christopher Priest, with a very nice cover art. I believe this was also published as an SF Masterworks. And here we have my second shelf, bit of sci-fi horror here with At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft, which I read earlier this year and I didn't think it was that good. Anthony Burgess' A Clockwork Orange in this sort of banned books edition, that was released by The Independent a few years ago. As you can see, this is the first in a 25 book collection of banned books. So yeah, pretty nice little edition to have. I found that in a charity shop a few months ago. Quite interested in reading that, actually. Sounds like it could be a bit of a disturbing read though. This Classics Library's edition of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. And then here we have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. And then here we have Survivors by Terry Nation, which is a very weird book contextually, as I'll mention now. As you might have seen earlier when I was showcasing that Invisible Man older edition, you might have seen this lurking in the background. Well, this here is a tie-in edition of Survivors, which was published sort of as a tie-in to the sort of relaunch or remake of Survivors that came out about a decade ago now. They did 2 series of this sort of remake of Survivors around 2008 and 2009, which wasn't very well received. And originally this book was a adaptation of the original 70s television series done by Terry Nation, who also created the TV show. So he basically did a target novelization of the show. The really weird thing about this book in particular, and this is the reason why I sort of bring over the box set of the TV show here, is that for the remake, they couldn't actually, from what I heard, they couldn't actually get the permission to base the remake off of the TV show itself. They actually had to base the remake off of the novelization by Terry Nation, which is really, really bizarre and weird, and yeah, really odd thing, that I would have said. And here we have some X-Files books with The Devil's Advocate, which is a prequel for Dana Scully. sort of a prequel novel, just sort of showcasing what the character did before the X-Files. And then here with an X-Files novelisation of Bad Sign, which interestingly enough is the novelisation of my least favourite episode of the whole show so far. Goblins, one of the few sort of X-Files full-length novels that there were. Whirlwind there, and then Ground Zero there. And here we have a few hardbacks of these sort of original novels based off of the show, which makes this range kind of interesting because they were both published in paperback and hardback, unlike the Doctor Who ones. So we have Ruins here, and then Ground Zero here. And then to end off this little section and this book collection video, we have The Art and Soul of Blade Runner 2049, an absolutely massive book that just barely fits onto my shelf here, and it is a compendium that compiles the sort of artwork for my favourite movie of all time in my favourite movie franchise of all time, Blade Runner, and it is an absolutely stunning book to have in the collection. Fantastic coffee table type of book. Today was a very conclusive video for the channel. Not only does it mark the end of the decade for it, but also the end of an era on it, that being the Doctor Who books. With this being my 6th and currently final book collection tour video on the channel. If this decade was the one for Doctor Who books, then the next one will be the science fiction discussion decade. I have a lot of plans currently on where I want to take the channel in the next few years. Whether it'll be staying true to the origins and continuing to upload a variety of Doctor Who videos, including reviews, discussion videos, top 10s and much more, but also pushing the boundaries of it, namely with a experimental series that I have coming up that are fanfiction audiobook originals that I will be making myself and uploading to the channel. I have 3 titles that are in development so far: Mindgate, The Library of Vanda Duckshrine, and the one that is most likely to come out first, that being Snowlands. All 3 of these stories are 60s era, with Mindgate being the only First Doctor one currently. And I will also be going out of the norm for the channel and diving into discussion and reviews on other realms of science fiction, such as other TV shows and books, as well as the continuation of me, the internet, Doctor Who and furries, along with reviews on shows like Black Mirror and reviews on science fiction novels such as H.G. Wells and much more. From 2014 up until 2019, I uploaded a total of 73 Doctor Who book reviews, which began on the 26th of August 2014 with 10 Little Aliens and ended this year on the 14th of July with Scratchman. A lot of people will probably be wondering and thinking, what are going to happen to Doctor Who book reviews on the channel? And the answer to that is that I don't think I am going to continue uploading reviews on them. However, I will definitely not stop doing Doctor Who book videos. I'm talking about certain ranges of the books, doing like certain lists of them, and talk about sort of a group of like noteworthy ones, like the top 5 most disappointing Doctor Who novels in one video, for example, something along the lines of that. I will also mention that I do have a Goodreads account that I do post updates to frequently, including reviews as well. For example, I recently posted one to the site on the new series novel Beautiful Chaos, which I read recently. And I would also like to quickly mention the fact that I also have a channel Twitter account that I would like to try and get started now, where I hope to be posting things in regards to the channel, videos that are works in progress, early releases and more, as well as general media things. And both this and the Goodreads account I shall be linking in the description of this video if you want to follow me on those sites. Either ways, I think that is pretty much all I have to say at the end of this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next decade for the new direction on the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and goodbye.